guys, I'm Amaya, and we're back with another episode of Talking Dreams. I'm here with my co-host Alex,
Yes,
and
sir.
today we have
Kelly Butt-Spirito. Love Kelly.
Yes, sir. Love Kelly in the
Hello.
building. Glad to have you on, my boy.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I appreciate you guys having me on.
For sure. So, just to start off with, you're known, I would kind of consider you just an overall creative, because you do so many different things as far as curation, videos, hosting events, creative direction, fashion now. So, what would you kind of describe your overall creative vision as far as going into any of these projects?
I feel like, for me, I try to just create something that makes people feel something, I guess. I think that's, the overall vision is, put something into the world that makes people feel something that's hopefully positive. Whether that's, an event, people leave with a inspiration or a feeling of community, or a video, it, provokes a feeling of inspiration, too. Or, something that's thoughtful, maybe in not an inspiring way, but, self-reflection, where you think about your life differently. So, I hope to just make things that are inspiring, thought-provoking, and just, leave the audience with a feeling that they weren't feeling before,
Got it. And when would you say, you notice that you have this talent, this ability to kind of project your creative vision onto people?
I feel like I actually don't necessarily think I have a talent. I just think that I've just worked really hard at it. I really think that, when you go back through the stuff that I was doing 3-4 years ago, it was really bad. But I think that I just had lived a lot of life in a short amount of time. I just went through a lot of hard experiences at a young age, and so I think that I always had something to say, and so that was helpful. But I think I don't really think I ever had a specific talent for creating. I think I just really love it a lot, so I just did it a lot, and I'm slowly getting better. I still have a long way to go, but I think that it was just I put in a lot of work, and also I just I feel like life is life is the most important thing to inspire the stuff that you make, and I had just gone through a lot of things that I felt I wanted to translate into my art, if that makes sense.
Nah, yeah, for sure. I definitely feel that. I feel like the best work of any craftsmanship or field comes from the any type of pain, because that gives you that gives you a true feeling nothing else can give, and that could be the biggest push you need to do whatever you want to do greatly. Yeah. So I completely get the idea that it takes some bad times to kind of persevere and appreciate and motivate you to continue to do more good. Yeah, I get that 1,000%.
I feel like the best artists, in my opinion, that I'm a fan of, they maybe aren't the best on paper, but they have a unique perspective on the world.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people that are just come from a very standard point of view. They might be really talented at their shots are really beautiful and stuff, but if they don't have a unique perspective on the world, it's I don't really find anything new in their art. But I feel like the videographers, the rappers, the musicians that come from a background that's maybe unique and the world hasn't quite seen it before. And I feel like for me, just I have a very interesting combination of being sober and also partying and also working in music and also just a few different things from a small town, working in stuff like that. So I think it was just a point of view that maybe is not common, which I feel like has helped me create certain things that are unique.
Word. How do you feel growing up in an area like Vermont kind of impacted how you see the world and how you've been able to project that into your vision?
I think it was it made me extra grateful for the opportunities that did come my way, just because there's so few opportunities to do creative projects that get a lot of attention from a small place like Vermont. And so when I did get opportunities eventually, I feel like I really took full advantage. I think for me, it's taken a long time to get in the door, but once I am in the door with certain people, I feel like they really see. I was talking about with someone yesterday, I feel like there's kind of two types of people as creatives. There's one that when you first meet them, that's the most interesting they are, and then the more you get to know them, you realize that there's not much there. Yeah. And then there's another type of person where the more that you get to know about them, the more impressive they become. Definitely. And I'd like to think that that's more my experience, and the way that people have perceived me is the more that they know, the more they realize that I have more to offer than maybe you would think at first. And so I think coming from Vermont, it took so long for people to give me a chance that when I did start to get opportunities, it was like I took full advantage. And then also, it's easier to stand out in a place like Vermont because there's not a lot of competition.
Yeah.
So that's helpful
Word.
too. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
facts.
Yeah.
Word, because I also know you've like discussed having worked early on with a lot of Vermont artists and kind of like building a foundation or like a scene over there. How was the kind of the journey, kind of trying to bring all these different artists together?
I feel like I came in at a time when a lot of them were sort of already in motion, but just needed to have someone to tie it together. Kind of like what you guys are doing for LIU artists. It was sort of like that, like all these different artists working individually, but maybe didn't have like a brand vision. And I think like when you're marketing an artist, it's really important to have like a brand vision behind them. And so for me, it was like it tied it all together. It made them all come together. So it was like I was lucky that I had a lot of artists that were already working on things, and I just was like lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time, I guess.
For sure. I could definitely attest to that because I feel like it's kind of the same thing as far as like when I met all the artists I met freshman year at LIU. Was just so many of them had already wanted it for themselves. Yeah. And I feel like once like they have their own drive for themselves, you can like, it's a lot easier to work with them because they're going to appreciate your vision more and kind of like understand like we should take this serious and like, you feel me, we could really make something out of this.
Totally.
Definitely.
And I feel like it's way more powerful when you're all on the same team with a common goal than like in competition when you're in a small environment like LIU or like Vermont, you know? And so like there were times when I was doing this where there was like little beefs, I guess. And like there's this band 99 Neighbors and this artist North Ave Jacks that I like started out with. And so 99 had already signed a deal and they were way bigger. And when we started popping off in Vermont, there was like tension for a while. Yeah. And I remember this person who worked in the industry like sort of to me like pulling me aside and being like, it's so stupid to beef with someone in your area because you have to realize that like there's people like you in every other state. Those should be your competition, not the people in your own. Like you need a band together. And then we ended up throwing a show together. And it was like a really big community moment. And after that, I feel like that was a really big momentum shift where like everyone was just kind of like, we got to put on for each other. Yeah. And now I feel like everyone really collaborates and stuff like that. And I see that with you guys with LIU. Like it's made way less tension between artists and way more like, yo, let's all help each other just grow and shit. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, definitely.
I know you had a show in Vermont that like got shut down or something, or the city was like, nah, that's not gonna happen. Like, how do you navigate like when stuff like that happens? Like if venues fall out or if like people are falling out, like what do you do then?
I think that's like probably one of the most difficult parts. The stuff that I've went through in the creative industry, I guess, is just like dealing with disappointments and trying to like bounce back and just stay positive. I think it's like super important to be an optimistic thinker because this stuff is like, I almost feel like it's constant failure and then the wins are when you react well to it, if that makes sense. And so I think that was like something when the city like shut it down, it was frustrating because they had already approved the show and then turned around like right before the show when everything was already in place and shut it down. And so it was really frustrating, but at the same time, I was just left with like, all right, how do I see a positive in this? And I think it did like raise the exposure level, and also it actually did lead to some like systemic change in my city, which was cool. Of just like we had donated a bunch of money to the city, and also they like that was gonna go towards youth who want to do creative stuff, and then also like they added a member, like a youth member, to the like board of like art. Of like the creative arts and stuff. They have this like thing called like Burlington City Arts. And so I think it just made more of like a youth presence that was really important just because there's not a lot of voices that get heard from like youth, specifically like minority youth in my city because it's like newly diverse, I guess. You know what I mean? So I think it was like really important. But yeah, it was hard at the time, I guess. You know what I mean? Yeah.
For sure. I know you feel me. You're very humble, so you might not perceive it this way, but like you've become a big face in Vermont in general, as far as like this senior you've essentially helped develop. How does it feel to kind of been able to contribute so much to bring that to where you're from?
Thank you. I appreciate it. It feels amazing. I think that's probably the thing I'm the most proud of, I guess, is like just feeling like I had an impact beyond just the projects. You know, like there's always the immediate thing of like people like the music or they like the video, but I do feel like I've touched a little bit of what I hope to leave, and it's sort of like that thing that's almost like larger than anything you're actually creating, and it's like a inspiration, I guess, that sort of like is passed on to the next generation, and so that to me is like what I hope to really leave. So that's why people ask me a lot, like, why do you keep coming back to Vermont? Because I always deal with pushback in Vermont, and it's way more difficult to get things done. Like in New York, I feel like people are very like open to new things, and like they want to collaborate and succeed. But to me, it's like there's always another cool thing in New York, and that's amazing. But I also feel like it matters because there's kids like me growing up in Vermont who have nothing to look to that's actually relatable. Like they see it on the internet, but it feels so out of reach. And so I've already seen the impact of like the stuff that I've done, even on a small scale, on the youth. And even like it's insane. Like there's literally a runway show happening in City Hall where my show got shut down in April that a kid from Vermont is putting on. And like, yo, that was not a thing when I was young in Vermont. And like there's every week, literally like every single week, there's another concert happening at a different like what we went to last night.
Yeah, I was about to say you did your last one of your most recent shows in like the legit City Hall of Burlington. And that was kind of an insane feeling. Like you could see like all like government officials' offices and stuff in like BK the Ruler's performing in like the auditorium. I'm like, this is crazy. How does the process go? Like how have you developed a relationship with your city to kind of get to a point where you can do stuff like that?
It was a long process, and I think that's something that I've had to learn through making mistakes. Is just like being patient is so important. I feel like a lot of people count themselves out because they get impatient and they're like, it's not working, so fuck this, you know. But for me, I've just had to continue to remind myself like it's a marathon, you know, it's not a sprint. Like it takes time to build something. And so like that show getting shut down was the beginning of that show eventually happening, and that was a turning point in my life. Like having Lil Uzi come, like that was one of the significant like viral things that's happened in my like brand, I guess, you know. And so like, and just like it was a legendary moment inside City Hall, bringing rappers, like bringing that culture into a place that's foreign. And I actually think a lot of the people in Vermont, it's not like it's a lot of that like subconscious biases. And so I think like it needs exposure. Like you need to just be around it to be like, oh, this is actually a really good thing. You know, like the city came to the show and they were like expecting it to be scary, and instead they were like so much positive energy. And that shit's important. You know?
You had a bunch of young people that, like, you feel me, who knows what they would be getting into on a night like that regularly. You feel me? And they're enjoying each other's presence, enjoying the music. Like it's a general positive environment, like you're saying. So how would you kind of describe the evolution of your shows from like when you first started with your first lineup of Vermont artists to now having artists like BK the Ruler and Landon Q perform at your shows in Vermont?
I guess it was just like a stepping stone each time. Trying to go bigger than the last. That's sort of been the brand goal, is like every show, let's just go bigger than the last. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be like a bigger size of show, but just like a bigger moment. Like City Hall was just a bigger moment because it was like in an auditorium. We had to build it, which was different. That's why I feel like I'm not extremely intimidated to do an outdoor festival, because like we actually built that show. Like we got the front gates and we built everything. Like that's not a concert venue. You know what I mean? And so it was like so that was fun and also challenging because like they had a smaller capacity than the room. The room was too big for the capacity they allowed us, the fire department, and so we had to like talk to the fire department and all this different stuff. But it was cool. And so I think like for me, just trying to get creative of like how to continue to grow it to something bigger. And really I think we're right on the threshold of my goal in the end, is having a once-a-year festival in Vermont and then just getting it bigger and bigger and bigger. And so like my hope is like that this year or next year to pull off the first festival and really have it just be like, I mean, you came out like just that culture of like, then we go out after the whole city turns up, and it's like it's a moment, you know. So that's my goal, is just every year more of the industry has their eyes on it until it can be like something where the hottest new artists are there, and super established artists. And not only that, like Limitless Dreams has a pass, Lyrical Lemonade has a pass, like No Jumper. Like I want everyone there so that it's like a cultural moment, you know. And
Definitely.
it brings it back to where I grew up that lacks that. So I don't know.
Exactly.
It would be special, you know.
Of course. Do you have any kind of ideas so far? Because I know I've seen you post on Instagram before, like the idea for the festival we call Butts Fest, right? Do you have any kind of ideas for like what it would kind of look like so far?
Yeah, so there's this venue called the Champlain Valley Fairgrounds where they have this big fair every year, like merry-go-round and like all that stuff. Or Ferris wheel, I don't know why I did that. They have like a Ferris wheel and they have like all this like rides and stuff. And so interestingly enough, the guy who runs that is a friend of mine's dad. And so I reached out to him. And that's the cool thing about Vermont is it's almost like a big family.
Everybody knows everybody.
Yeah, everyone knows everybody, which can be really frustrating sometimes. And it can also be really helpful sometimes. You know what I mean? And so, so I had reached out to him and I was like, I think that, because his son had always been like, come to the fairgrounds, like they'll help you out. It's like way bigger. They know how to handle this stuff. And I was like, I'm not ready for it, you know. And then I finally like reached out to his dad and was like, I think the time is now, you know. And so his dad was like, we had a whole meeting and they're down. It's just trying to like make it all the puzzle pieces fit. The reason why it's Butts Fest is just like my last name is like Butts Spirito, and like I always got like clowned for having Butts as my last name. And one of my friends from my group home was like, yo, you should call it Butts Fest. It's just dope. Like it's just like, you know, it's like and I don't know why it just stuck. And then when every time I would say it to someone, they would start saying it, and I was like, you know what? But I still might call it like Love Kelly Fest just to keep the brand going. But I also want to call it Butts Fest. So we'll see. It's to be
The
determined.
merch for that could
I'll
go
fuck with
crazy.
the
Crazy, right?
That could be some cool merch from
I feel like
that.
Yeah,
That
yo,
would be dope.
the creative direction.
Seriously.
Yeah,
No
like
cap.
something that
Yeah.
at first when you're kind of like,
Yeah.
it almost like just causes a reaction that would be fun, you
That
know.
would be
Exactly.
really fun.
So, yeah.
Do you have any date in mind or a roundabout time or?
The problem is with my state is that like the only way to really pull off a show of this size, that I'm trying to do like a 5,000 person capacity, is to have the colleges there, because it's a really big college town.
Yeah.
And so it either kind of has to be in the early fall or the spring. And so that kind of like is limiting, because I would love to do it in the summer. That would be the
That would
best,
be the
you know?
best.
So it's like tough. I don't know. I
Yeah.
think maybe the early fall
Okay.
would be the hope, and then eventually maybe if it gets big enough, do it
Get to the
in the summer,
summertime.
you know.
Okay.
But that's sort of, honestly, that's been the biggest challenge, is that specific thing of being like, what the timing has to be right with the weather.
With the
and everything.
weather.
Yeah,
If
that's
it's
something
brick
I'm scared
outside,
about.
ain't nobody going.
I know.
At all.
I know.
At all.
And the rain, like that's,
Yeah.
I'm scared of
Oh,
that.
no.
Yeah, and that's something you can't literally
Yeah, you can't
interpret
predict
or
it,
estimate until like a day before,
Yeah.
because throughout the week is gonna change. Like
Yeah, exactly.
exactly, yeah,
Exactly.
bro.
Just hope for the best.
Literally. So I kind of want to transition back into talking about your early stages as far as with your creative journey, because something I've just recently learned is that you were playing baseball in college originally. So would you like to talk about your early career in baseball and all that?
Yeah, for sure. So originally, yeah, I guess my first dream was to be a professional baseball player. Originally, found out that wasn't in the cards. But yeah, I loved baseball. I played like all through high school, and committed and signed like a letter of intent to this school called Evansville, University of Evansville. Our like one claim to fame was my freshman year there. We beat Kentucky in basketball, and it was like a big moment. But other than that, it's pretty unknown school. But it was like,
Word.
yeah. And the other claim to fame is actually that the entire basketball team died in a plane crash, which is super sad. Many years ago, not like recently. but yeah.
Jesus.
So anyways, shout out Evansville. I love Evansville. It was a great time.
Shout out Evansville.
Shout out.
We said this is not
And
funny,
what's
but that just caught me off
yo,
guard.
this is the craziest part. Is one player was hurt and stayed back, and then 2 weeks later died in a car crash. Isn't that actually nuts?
This is
That's
a great
crazy.
Yeah, it was
episode.
really crazy. They
This
have a
is
memorial
great.
on campus. Like
Oh,
it's really.
well,
sad.
no, that's crazy.
But anyways, back to the baseball. Back to the baseball.
Wow.
So
Kelly, that was golden. Yo, this is really my miss,
Yo,
bro.
my
bro.
bad.
I didn't mean
No,
to
that's
go
dope.
full
That shit is.
conspiracy.
That's really
Scratch
shit I
everything
really-
else. We about to dive
it's really
into
actually
Evansville.
crazy. Yeah.
That's
But
crazy.
So yeah, it was my only D1 offer, and so I took it, and it was in the middle of the Midwest. I like had it wasn't like I was necessarily excited to go, but it ended up being an awesome experience, and I met so many good friends, and I loved a lot of the people that I met there. But so like when you play college baseball, they have you go to these like summer leagues where you like go to random places, and the one that I like was in love with this girl, my high school sweetheart, and she'd broken up with me, and she moved to San Diego, and so I like chose a San Diego summer league to like try and get her back. And I like moved to San Diego for the summer before.
Wow.
But interestingly enough, it was like such a God moment for me because that's when I was exposed to like LA for the first time.
Yeah.
And I like met all these people, and that's when I fell in love with directing videos. Interestingly enough, when I was about to go play baseball, I had shot a little bit of videos in high school, but like that's when I really was like, I met this kid, or I had known him from Vermont, but he's a director in LA. His name's Zev York, and he's amazing. He's like done a lot of stuff with Miguel, and like, and so I had reached out to him on Instagram and was like, "Yo, are you in LA?" And he was like, "Yeah, like come through." And he was doing this music video for Major Lazer, the like DJ.
Fire.
people.
Wow.
And I like sat with him, watched him edit it. He was maybe like 24 at the time, and I was like, "Yo, this is like the craziest thing ever. Like, I love this. I want this lifestyle." And so it planted the seed for me, and I still had to like go through lose baseball and go through these things to really realize that it was something I really wanted to do. But like, it was awesome, and I became like interested in it. And then I went off to college, and while I was playing baseball, I got there and realized that like I was not as good as the other kids, and I was like, man, this is not gonna work out. Like, they're just way better than me, like straight up. And I wasn't really motivated to try and get to that level, you know. And at the same time, I was like on Instagram looking at all these directors and like falling in love with the video and film industry, and I was like, this is like it felt way more in my pocket of like, I think I've always been better at creative stuff than I ever was at sports, but I just like wanted to fit in high school, so I like leaned way more into sports. Like in high school I used to act in like theater, but I like shied away from it because I didn't want to be like perceived as like a theater kid, even though
I get that.
I wish I had done it way more because I was way better at theater than I ever was at sports, you know. But anyway, so when I went to college, I ended up getting cut at the end of my fall for baseball, and so I was like heartbroken because that was my dream, is to like play D1 and try and get drafted and stuff. And so so then I dropped out of college actually, and I took so like in between that I moved home, and I was hitting up rappers on Instagram, and this artist who I'm very close friends with now, Crunch Calhoun, who's like very close with Dave East, was on tour with Dave East.
Really?
And he's the only rapper that DM'd me back, and he was like, "Yo, pull up and shoot my show, and I'll get you backstage and stuff."
Oh shit.
So I think I was like 19 years old, and so I drove to Boston from Vermont, and it was in the snow.
Damn.
And I was like getting a DM back from him every like 30 minutes probably to an hour. And so I'm like, I get to the show, and then I don't hear anything from him. And so I'm like, all right, I'm just going to go wait out front. So I DM'd him. I was like, yo, I'm out front. I have my camera. And I just waited out there for probably like an hour and a half in the snow, and the line is sold out. So like the line is around the block, and I'm just waiting at the front of the line, like a little away from the line in the snow, just like no one's coming. And then eventually I was like, man, I really just drove to Boston for no reason. Like, I'm fucked. Like, this is crazy. And then the door props open, and one of his mans is like, yo, are you the videographer kid? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, come on. Brings me inside, brings me backstage. I like meet Dave East, meet Millies, meet all these artists. And I was like, this is insane. Like, you know, I'm backstage. Like, I'd never seen anything like that in my life. And then I'm just on stage with Dave East the whole show. I'm filming, like, full access. Like, and it was just like, it was a mind-blowing moment for me, just feeling the energy of what a rap show was like. Like, I just like the walls shaking and the crowd chanting the lyrics, and I was like, yo, I swear it was like love at first sight. I was like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And I think also, like, from Vermont, I didn't have, like, I wasn't exposed to much of that. I'd gone to some rap shows as a kid, but like, it was like I always followed it online, and I think that's what kids feel when they come to my shows, is it's like a different type of energy that we were never exposed to as kids, you know. That's like so inspiring, you know, and it makes you feel like anything's possible. So after that show, I like booked a one-way flight to Puerto Rico, and because I was
He's been outside.
I was like, I was trying to.
We got Midwest, San Diego, Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
Outside.
Basically,
boy.
okay, so I was trying to go film a video in Africa because I wanted to, like, I was just trying to do some like, oh, I'm gonna go
Wow.
film.
Yeah, international.
I wanted to just travel and clear my
Okay.
head because I had just got cut, and I was like, but I was like falling in love with videos, and so there's this website where you could like do, it's called Work Exchange, and you can like do a service for like anywhere in the world, and they'll pay for your like housing.
Word.
And so I was trying to film a school for like a house in or for like a school in Uganda. And then I got scared of like how I had to get all these shots, and like the flight was really long, and I don't like love flying, so I like was like, all right, fuck that. But I didn't want to be in Vermont, and so I was just on my like free spirit shit, and I like looked up like cheapest flights to tropical like destinations. and Puerto Rico was like the cheapest one, was a couple $100s, and so I booked it and flew there with no plan, and then just started staying in hostels, and then like it was the craziest trip of my life. So then, long story short, I like realized I missed baseball, but I wasn't good enough to play D1, so I wanted to make videos. So then I applied to Ithaca College, which had a good film program and also was a D3 baseball program, and I transferred there. And then the pandemic hit, dropped out, moved to New York, and then went broke and moved to Vermont. And then that was the start of everything.
Word.
So yeah,
Wow.
it was
I
a
feel
journey
it.
for
That's
sure.
crazy. Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
Who would have thought?
Yeah, it was crazy. Lived out there for like 2 months or a month and a half to 2 months, and like met a lot of amazing people, and like just like really just found myself, I guess, in a lot of different ways. Realized I wanted to be a like director, and like, you know, just like crazy times out there. Like I was so young, and I got taken into this friend group of older guys who were probably 26 and girls, and we were traveling all over, and like it was New Year's Eve, and I remember us all like skinny dipping while the fireworks were going up over the beach, and like we had this like, yeah, so it was like it was just like
Wow.
it was my like
Yeah.
just like those types of experiences, interestingly enough, has really, I think, helped me have a perspective and a vision for the stuff that I create later, because I had experienced
Yeah,
a lot of
living
different
life.
things where I wasn't really doing much but just living, you know.
Exactly,
And so,
for
yeah.
sure. I find it interesting because you like now hearing that you've been through 2 different schools first, and then like as you're realizing baseball may not be where you want to go strive towards for the future, and then you fall in love with videos, but you end up in LIU, and but interestingly enough, you're a journalism major at LIU. How did like?
So when I was in Vermont, I was starting to gain some traction in music, I guess. Like the artist that I work closely with, North Ave Jacks, had signed a deal, and I was starting to do. I had thrown my first show, I think, before, but during that time, I guess I was sort of thinking like, what do I want from my life? And when I thought of becoming like, I was like, say best case scenario, I become the biggest music video director in the world. Would I feel fully satisfied? And I always felt like there was this thing in music where I would, and that sort of circles back to that feeling of like actually passing on an impact to the next generation. That's what's kept me in music. But I felt like when I was just churning out music videos and trying to grow and get bigger numbers wise, it felt a little bit empty to me. I always I loved it, the music, but I didn't feel like I was like contributing anything like really substantial to the world. And so it was always like, I always felt like I wanted to do something that had like a little bit more of a deeper impact. Not that music doesn't, but interestingly enough, I think music actually has done that for me with like the community of Vermont in a way. But like I always like was really interested in storytelling and people, and so I loved making videos. So I was like, I want to be a video journalist, like Vice type stuff. And I had this conversation with this guy who's like one of the video journalists at the New York Times, and I did like a Zoom call with him, and I was like, that is the job I would want to have. And so what's funny is, so then I was like, I need to go back to college, study journalism, and I'm kind of going to step away from music. Like, I did my stuff. My artist is on his way. Like, it's been cool, you know? And then I threw my first show right before I came to LIU, like a month before. And then, like, funny, and then, like, things just took off in a way that it kind of took a life of its own in a way that I never expected. And so then I ended up being like, man, I actually do think I would be fulfilled by this. And then now I'm already in college, but I've loved doing both. And so
Yeah.
I'm kind of just like embracing both at the same time, I guess.
For sure. I found it really interesting just now when you mentioned like being happy, satisfied doing music, but it wasn't fulfilling you because it didn't impact positively on the world. I literally feel the exact same way as far as like I feel like my purpose on earth is to like, but I feel like my philosophy is that everyone should originally want to positively impact society
Yeah.
in some way. And I feel like as a people, humans have kind of corrupted themselves to the idea that like we need to, you feel me, think for ourselves and think for like our like me instead of like what can we do for each other and think as a community.
Yeah.
And I find it interesting that you also have this perspective of like, yeah, I could, because you feel me, you could go big in music and go and take your career anywhere and not impact anybody. You feel me? You'll be
Yeah.
good.
Yeah,
But like
exactly.
you want to do something for the world, and I feel like that's the most powerful thing, especially in like this field, in this creative field where we have a lot of influence. Because you feel me, like you said, like you kind of learn that music kind of does have an impact on people.
Yeah.
Like entertainment, I feel like is the quickest way to touch people, because like the way I look at it, I've had the same thing where I want to positively impact people and positively impact the youth and teach them to do better.